Welcome, everyone. So glad that you're joining us today. And I'm thrilled to be introducing to you our special guest, my dear friend, Micky ScottBey Jones. So Micky, pronouns she and her, is known as a justice doula. She's a womanist, contemplative nonviolence practitioner, facilitator, movement chaplain, consultant, and certified Enneagram teacher who facilitates conferences, workshops, pilgrimages, and conversations. Her work is grounded in facilitation of healing and transformation through practical spirituality, resource and resilience skill development, and intercultural dialogue. Micky, it's a joy to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Really glad to be with you.
Yeah. So what do you mean when you say that we have what we need in a world that seems so full of scarcity?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like really given that myth of scarcity from our earliest days, right? Even on the playground, right? There's one ball and I can have it. It's my ball. It's not yours. But the truth is that we actually have what we need. We have what we need for survival. We have what we need for healing. And it is both within us, in the bodies, in the mind that we have, in our hearts. I believe that we are, as you said, I'm an Enneagram teacher, so I believe that we have the wisdom and intelligence from those three centers of our being, and we have it from this ancestral lineage. We none of us sprung out of the earth. Unless there's a new way of human beings coming into the world, which maybe we've perfected that in some dark lab somewhere. There's an actual test tube baby that has come about. But as far as I know, we all come from a lineage, from a line. And so we have what we need from those people who have come before us. We just don't always recognize that or remember it. It's been hidden under all of the capitalism, everything that tells us that we are lacking, that we need to go buy something, do something, achieve something in order to be whole. But in reality, it really comes from our roots. One of my teachers who I didn't know in life, Rosemary Freeney Harding, who is a great civil rights activist and a mystic all on her own, a woman of the Mennonite tradition, who is known as a great spiritual teacher. She really talked about how we all have roots and that our roots are intertwined, actually. And so we have these roots where we can dig deep and actually find how our ancestors made their way. Our elders that we do still have, if we will just sit down and talk with them, they will tell us what got them through their difficult times. And so we really actually have the technologies, the sacred texts, the stories, the rituals, all of that we have in our communities, our ancestors, our elders, and even within our body, mind, spirit.
Mm-hmm. That's so good, Micky, because I feel like so often we feel like these resources are things that are packaged and sold back to us, and it's kind of pay to play. And so we imagine, self-care and self-help as being expensive, and maybe we budget it, maybe we don't, and that creates the sense of scarcity. But what you're saying is actually, if we open our eyes to our living elders as well as those who have come before, that we have everything we need.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I didn't even mention the earth, right? Like, I love having just, like pretty crystals. I have, crystals on me now, but there's energy there. There's, actually going outside and feeling the breeze on my skin reminds me I'm alive. We know there's energy from the sun because we use solar power for things, but that energy actually powers us. The moon, if it can pull the waves, it can pull us, right? And so whether you believe in how the stars moving or their placement in the sky affecting your life, we can choose to get some understanding in the same way people have gotten understanding for centuries, for millennia, to like just look to those elements of the earth which hold so much rich wisdom for us. So there are so many places we can look, and it's when we forget all of those things, when we kind of succumb to what's being packaged and sold. I mean, hey, I love a massage and a spa day as much as the next person. Like, I love it. And it's the everyday ways that I can resource myself with what's within me, what's in the earth, and what's from my ancestors and elders that really keeps me going in a sustainable way.
That's so good. Yeah, as we decolonize our hearts and maybe decapitalize, our wallets and begin to awaken to the abundance around us, what are some examples of rooting deep into our lineage? What are some specific examples of healing wisdom that are available from specific lineages? And maybe if you want to speak to this even from your own lineage.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say at the outset that this is not about having to necessarily take what I'm saying and use it in your own. I mean, yes, there are lessons we can get from each other's cultures and from, I am a Black woman who's descendant from Africans who were brought to the United States or Turtle Island as enslaved people. And I do think there is great wisdom in that. And so part of my life is teaching that wisdom, is sharing that wisdom with others, and in hopes that it awakens you, whoever you are, to the wisdom in your traditions, and for the wisdom that is kind of universal in all of our traditions and our lineages. And for me, one that has resonated with me for a very long time, as long as I've known it, is the tradition of what are called brush harbors or hush harbors. And these were places where enslaved Africans met they called them brush harbors because they were kind of covered in brush, these hidden away places, these secret places that were coverings of nature. And so they didn't have to be built. They were just places that one could steal away. And so they were also places where women were often leaders, but they were leaders in kind of this democratic sense. Everyone brought what they had and participated in the healing, in the connection, in this alchemy of new religion, bringing from the old world, collecting from the new, finding these stories of liberation that were woven in these Christian texts that my people were being given, but also coming from their traditions that they had in Africa, and where they could lament, where they could have joy, where they were outside of any oppressive gaze, and they could just love one another. And so for me, what I take from that is that we need secret places. We need spaces where we can be full of joy and full of sorrow, where we can be our full selves, where we can bring the little offering we have, and the person beside us brings their little offering, right? It's not flashy. It's not extravagant service or ritual. Maybe it's that you have one little pretty rock that you found that's significant to you, and someone else brings one little sweet thing that they were able to steal away from somewhere, and you bring it all together, and it becomes a little bit of joy in whatever is happening in the world. And so I've learned that I have to have these times with friends or loved ones, with other people who share my same sadness or oppression, and I have to kind of steal away and take that time, and that alone is precious and is enough to restore me. Not that we solve anything there or it changes the circumstance, maybe sometimes, but it's in the getting together. It's in the seeing one another. It's in recognizing each other's humanity, no matter what's happening, no matter how strange and wild the world seems, how much it doesn't make sense. We can come together and make sense by looking in each other's eyes for a few moments. That idea of the Bresh Harbor, that I recognized it immediately when I learned about it. I recognized it that I was already doing that with people that I loved and knew. And so I feel like this tradition has passed down, whether we know it or not. It's a thing that people do is gather in these little groups, and that's a sacred thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're not only well versed in this sort of Black diaspora spiritual tradition of your people, but you've also studied formally, spiritually and theologically with Native American, other indigenous folks to this continent. Can you speak to any of the wisdom that you've discovered that either was novel to you or that really confirmed something that you discovered in your own lineage?
Yeah. Well, there are so many. I like to talk about the medicine wheel, which is known in many indigenous North American cultures. I also like to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is, you wouldn't think it was indigenous, but actually what we know is that Maslow studied with the Blackfoot people, and he studied them and saw them as subjects. Unfortunately, didn't see them as co-learners or co-laborers or people to teach him per se. And so this Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we, most of us who have any kind of psychological training or human development or child development training, which is my kind of first area of study, we know that Maslow came up with this hierarchy, this triangle, where first your basic kind of physical needs are met: food, water, shelter. And then upon that, all other human needs are met. Well, we now know that this came from his time with the Blackfoot people, but he misunderstood what their society was really like and what was really the way to self-actualization. It was actually a teepee, right? Which isn't just a triangle. It's three-dimensional. It's rounded. The mushrooms at the bottom of the teepee are just as important as the angelic, godlike beings at the top of the teepee. That the baby is just as important as the parent. And so self-actualization, or knowing who you are, and being able to problem solve and being able to relate to another human being and to other beings around you, the animals and the plants and the soil, that all of that happens as you're being nurtured physically, right? Self-actualization, who you are, doesn't happen after you've been fed. It's actually a part of the feeding. That's why when a baby feeds with their parent, they're able to actually, from the beginning, even though babies don't have fully developed eyesight, they can see that distance from the breast to the parent's face, right? Because they are learning who they are. They are learning, I will take care of you, and you interact with me. This is a mutual connection, right? They are learning who they are. And that is self-actualization. It's not at the top. It's interwoven. It's a spiral process, right? And so we learn that you can't just meet the physical needs of people. And we have now tons of psychological studies, right, to show that if you merely feed a being, they will not grow as much as if you feed it and love it. We have many studies of children in orphanages who are fed but are not held, and they do not grow. Right. And so this is the indigenous wisdom. It's not a stacking, right? It's not like, oh, I'll just throw you some food and you'll be fine. It is, you need to understand that we are part of a community. And that's what then also allows this idea of communal perpetuity to evolve, right? That our community continues because we care for one another, because I am you and you are me, right? Like we grow together. And so that is just one kind of indigenous understanding of how we have what we need within each other. If I hoard all the food, I'm actually not going to do better than if I make sure that we're both eating. Or if I have shelter and you're out in the rain, that's not actually going to make us survive as a species. We will, in fact, die quicker because I allow you to suffer. And so many indigenous cultures know this and behaved like this and continue to. And it remains a mystery to many of us steeped in Western culture. But it is truly how we survive and thrive, is that if we do it together. And so, it's when we can go back to that wisdom and correct, right? Like, there couldn't be many reasons that Maslow came up with his understanding the way he did. But now that we know that indigenous wisdom is there for us, we can learn and we can adjust how we interact with each other. And it can even be, we can adjust our like the way we interact with our families, growing out into our communities, to our government, everything, knowing that this is the true way to heal all of us together collectively and individually.
Yeah, that's just mind blowing, Micky, because Maslow's hierarchy is such a it's such a trope in coaching circles and self-help circles. I know so many people, men especially, were like, yeah, let's see, what do we got to do to self-actualize? And there's the checklist. Okay, got to get these basics taken care of, and then this and this. And it's all so mechanical, and it's all so solitary. And so what I'm hearing you say is that in this more original understanding that he borrowed from, didn't fully understand, it's like each of those levels permeates the other. They're not inseparable, and they're done together, so that even self-actualization, it's not to over romanticize or say that, oh, indigenous people were all just like completely communal. My understanding from studying immediate return forager cultures and stuff is that no, there's actually a good balance of solitude and individual development as well as collective interbeing. But in our current culture that is most likely to use Maslow's hierarchy, it goes way over into the individual side. And so, yeah, what I'm hearing you say is it's almost more like it's less of a hierarchy of needs and more like what integral philosopher, and I'm sure Ken Wilber, and I'm sure others talk about as a holarchy, that each part contains what was nested inside of it and grows around it. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, there's another researcher, Cross, who developed a different way to look at these needs, and it does have that. It's like a circular. It's like circles that kind of go out from each other, with those, with spirituality actually at the center, and then belonging needs, and then your food and shelter and all of that, right? Because can you exist by yourself on an island? Sure, maybe for a time. But you also need interaction with other beings. You need to somehow know you're not alone in the world, right? We even, with all of us on this planet, continue to search the universe for other beings. We want to know we're not alone in the universe, right? So there's something there that it's not just having a meal, it's having a meal with someone that makes it feel full. Right. And so there's a way that we continually become who we are meant to be in relationship with other people. It doesn't mean you're with other people all the time. There are still times when you need to be alone, when you need to search, when you need to go on that hero's journey by yourself, but you're able to go because of the community you leave from and you return to. And that's, I think, part of the remembering that you have it within yourself. You have it within your community to find the healing that you need.
So does this in any way tie into the concept of Sankofa? And how can I learn from this for my own healing and resilience medicine?
Well, I mean, we're talking about returning to those indigenous lessons, to, our cultural lessons. And Sankofa is a concept. It's a Bono and Dinkra symbol. And it also comes from the Twi language of the Akan tribe in Ghana. And this is a very important symbol for me, so much so I actually have it tattooed on my body. Um, so this is a life principle for me. And the simplest understanding of Sankofa is go back and fetch it. The symbol is a bird with its feet facing forward, but its neck arching back, and it's plucking an egg off of its back. And you see it in lots of different symbolized ways, and it can actually also kind of have a heart shape. But this idea of, and like the longer idea is, it is not taboo to fetch it, to fetch what is at risk of being left behind. That's what it is. It's not taboo to go back and fetch what is at risk of being left behind. And so this idea that we go forward only by being able to go back and bring forward and innovate based on what our ancestors and elders have taught us. Again, none of us spring up out of the ground. There is no self-made man or self-made person. It just doesn't really exist. We come from something, and we are shaped by many things. Some that we would prefer to forget that hurt us or harm us, and some that we find a lot of joy in, and we love how it has shaped us. But all of those things are something that we can find lessons from, that we can learn from. And so this concept has been reclaimed by many African Americans. It is known widely throughout the diaspora. And it's just a thing that we can, it's a concept that I think anyone can learn from, right? Because I think one of the kind of, I don't know if it's, I mean, I would use the word lie, like one of the lies of Western culture is, or supremacy culture, right, is that all that matters is now, right? Like, you don't really need to worry about your connections to the past, right? Like, all that matters is going forward. Innovate, innovate, innovate. Always forward motion. And in fact, we're not really inventing anything new. We are building on what generations before have known. I know when I read stories of, people who have lived maybe, 50, 100, many years before me, I still can see things. I'm like, how did they know? How do they know me? When I read people whose lives I admire, people I consider mental mentors, I'm like, wait, how is your life so much like mine? And so there's something about that, not just knowledge, like technical knowledge, but there's this like weaving of humanity that we learn from the stories of those who have come before. And so that to me is what Sankofa means. It helps me feel less alone too. Yes, like more connected to all of humanity, to understand, and even to go to different cultures and understand the similarities of different cultures and how this group did this and how they, overcame this great thing, or this little girl in India did that, or whatever. There's something about it that connects me with all humanity that makes it a little easier to keep going today. And so that's how Sankofa feels like a really important principle in healing and in taking care of myself.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Micky. That's so profound and obviously so to you, as you've literally had it tattooed on your body. It actually reminds me of a better and more beautiful organic metaphor for one that I've borrowed in the past, a more maritime metaphor, which is a kedge. A kedge is a small anchor that, rather than used to keep a boat stationary, it's actually used to move a ship forward. They will throw the kedge forward, but it roots in the ground. It roots in what is, and it can be used to make a course correction or to actually literally propel a ship. And so years ago, I co-founded a strategic foresight firm or futures firm called Kedge Forward, kind of looking at that, how we move forward by anchoring in what is. And but Sankofa, that's beautiful. So I'm curious, like, in all of these explorations of these specific indigenous traditions, I know that a lot of times we, in the West at least, we tend to think of this idea of timeless and universal wisdom. And so I'm wondering, are there any ancient healing and resilience building technologies that are universal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you can never say 100% universal, but there are things that I feel like are universal in that you can find in nearly every tradition. I can't think of a people group, for instance, that doesn't have some form of music or song, right? Like there is this universality about song. That's why we have superstars now, right? Like these mega superstars, because their music appeals to people in every nation. But I think we find that in every people group. There are ways of creating music, creating rhythms. And music creates these euphoric states in us. It helps us tell our stories. It helps us pass on knowledge, right? What's one of the first things we learn as children? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? We learn just the basic letters through a song because we know that will help us remember. And even before that, how do mothers and parents soothe their baby, just humming and creating some kind of rhythm and rocking with their baby, and right there is this way that human beings, no matter their culture, connect to another human being, that rocking the baby, and passing our knowledge on through song. And even when the time signatures are very different, there is a way we use rhythm and drum and patterns, right? And so I think that kind of universal, soothing or connection point, that way of passing things on, we see that in music and song. Related to that, of course, is movement. Pretty much universally, you're going to find that there's some form of movement, some form of dance. It may not always, it doesn't always cross-translate, but there's always some kind of movement that a culture has. I recently saw a video or several videos that are kind of going viral on the internet of these Indian dancers, these women Indian dancers using hip hop music, right? And I just loved it so much because it just felt like this communication. Like I immediately understood them, and I got it in a way that maybe I wouldn't in a conversation. But there are just ways that we move that communicate things. Prayer. Prayer of some kind, which prayer can be poetry, prayer can be chanting, prayer can be silence, right? And so there are ways that we pray with our bodies, with our voices, and I feel like there is, whether it's to a being, with each other, to the earth, prayer seems to be a universal way of resourcing ourselves, right? It's not necessarily about what you believe or a tradition, but it's a way of kind of putting something out into the world. And lastly, one that I would say that sometimes we take for granted, and something that has been systematically taken away from folks at times, and is one of the ways we know how powerful it is touch. And the healing power of touch cannot be overstated. So, and this is everything from how you touch yourself, like giving yourself a massage, just rubbing the part of you that hurts, to cradling a child, to when I was talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, really talking about that connection. It's not just being with a person, but it's actually touch too. And, many colonizing cultures took touch away from the people that were colonized, right? Indigenous folks who were sent to residential schools were told they could not hug or comfort one another in those schools. The nuns and teachers were not allowed to comfort the children. Only have punishment, right? Painful touch. And so we know how important touch is in helping you grow and actually building your immune system. The work of Robert Sapolsky, he talks about the effect of stress on human beings and how important touch is on all primates, actually. But we need touch in order to stay well. In order to grow. We need our face stroked. We need, someone to put a hand on our shoulder. Even when, you have a moment of emotional pain or resonance with someone, what do? We often touch our heart, or, oh, I feel that. Right. So there's something about touch that is sacred, that allows us to touch into our own pleasure center so that we know what feels good to us and what feels bad to us. So it's a deeply powerful thing, which is why we have to be so careful with it, right? Why we have to know what feels like good touch and what feels like bad touch. And why we also can't necessarily be stingy with it, right? Like touch can overflow. Let us touch one another. In the Black church, we say, I want to touch and agree, right? Like touch a neighbor and say, amen, right? There's a power in holding hands and touching each other in order to touch into that healing power that runs in my bones and runs to the next person that I'm touching. So that feels like a very universal human way of healing, is to touch another human, to co-regulate with that human, to feel their life force. And if we can't do that, to at least be able to just give some touch to ourselves in order to soothe ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Micky. Thank you for illuminating these universals. And I found myself kind of going on a ride with you, looking at these, certain ones like touch do seem truly universal and maybe even arguably acultural, although certainly some cultures might, diminish it or increase the importance of it. But then some of these are categories like movement, singing, prayer, that occur to me as, yes, these are universal modes of being, but of course, different cultures produce specific movements, specific songs, specific prayers. And you even named your delight at seeing these dancers from India incorporating hip hop. Like it felt like a respectful cultural exchange that just enhanced the vibrancy in what was available. But of course, we're also aware, those of us who are both on a spiritual journey, a mystical journey, as well as a journey of conscientiousness, that not all forms of borrowing from cultures feels good to the originating cultures. We have a term for that now, cultural appropriation, and it's a very controversial topic. And so I'm wondering, in this dance of the universal and the particular, how can I discover healing wisdom within various traditions without appropriating or assuming my right to another culture's healing? So I guess it's a two-part question. There's the element of how can I respectfully culturally exchange with cultures whose healing practices I genuinely find meaningful? What's a process through which I can do that? But then also, how do I discover my own lineages, ancestors, and healing resources?
Yeah, I think that's a really important conversation and quest. Um, Sometimes when we have these conversations, I know I always hear, oh, relationship, relationship, relationship. And so it kind of feels like it's a worn out thing to say, but I do believe it's true. As you said, I was theologically raised by Indigenous folks. I am part of North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies. That is both my theological academic home and a place of practice. We do ceremony together. We know one another. We show up for each other. And so there is something about finding community, both with peers, people who are on your level, who you can have really clear, vulnerable conversations with, and people that feel equal to you, if that makes sense, right? Like it's because there's also a relationship with mentors and elders, right? So I have that as well. I have my teachers. And so I think that's what makes it important to be involved in a collective or a community, right? To have people who do have roots in those communities. And every tradition and people group and tribe are different as far as who they allow in or how they pass on these traditions, what's considered okay. And so deferring to those people in respectful ways and being patient and allowing relationship to build, I think is really important. Often when we feel empty or we feel our own sadness or brokenness or an urge to heal and repair, we want to go fast. And we want we want to relieve some pain. But knowing that our histories are all complicated with each other. As I said, Rosemary Freeney Harding talks about how in the United States, we all have roots, and our roots are kind of intertwined, right? That we are all together, and we need to dig into those roots. But the truth is, they are intertwined, and it's kind of gnarly down there, and we gotta kind of sort through all that, and we gotta figure that out in a way that that hopefully doesn't cause more pain, but allows for greater healing amongst one another. And so that takes time, and that takes relationship. It takes being able to mess up, to say something wrong or do something wrong, and to come back again and say, I'm sorry, I'd like to try again. Will you allow me to try again? And I think good teachers allow you to mess up and to try again. They welcome you in. I remember the first time I was welcomed into a ceremony where they were blessing the students, the younger folks, and we were being blessed by all of our aunties and uncles in our Nate's community. And I just wept because I just, felt this welcoming that wasn't based on blood. I sure there are things I can go back and try and find ancestors, and maybe there's an indigenous relative there, but it wasn't based on any of that. It was based on my relationship with the people in that community and my connection to them and my reverence for our ceremonies and the ways without trying to change them, but just trying to learn. I think relationship is really important. again, in two different ways, both the kind of mentor, the higher relationship, and the peer relationships. And long term, right? People need to know you are in for the long term. And then I think we need to observe in our bodies what feels right. Like, there is a knowing inside of ourselves about what feels right. But we have to get quiet and still. We have to trust that that knowing even exists. I know many of my years, I did not trust that that knowing exists, and it does exist. We have to trust that there's a knowing in the land, right? So if we're gathering wisdom from the land we live on, even if it's not our people's land, right? Because as someone whose ancestors were brought here from Africa, this is not my land. So I need to find a connection with the land, with the indigenous land that's here. And how do I reverence that? How do I learn from the land? How do I learn from the people whose land it is? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of not just meeting people. Yes, that's important. And there's intuitive work that needs to happen there. There's a conversation I can have with the land, with my watershed. And so how do I go about establishing that conversation? That's going to be different for everybody, but that does include spending quiet time in the land. And you can do that anytime you're on any land. Have that intuitive, direct conversation with the land. Going into the stories, finding ways to find that stories. I mean, we are in an information age, right? That we can find information. We can find stories of people. We can, whether that's digitally, YouTube, on, archives, whether it's reading books, like we can find so much information. So you don't even have to be a reader, right? There's so many ways to get that into your soul, to hear those stories. So many projects, big and small, that are being done on, all of these peoples, that you can find it around you. You can find your own, even if you don't know maybe where your lineage goes directly back to. You might have some sense of your people, that your family generally comes from Europe, that your family generally comes from Ireland, that your people generally come from Ghana, right? You might be able to find something and then be able to begin a conversation with those stories, with those lineages, with those religious traditions that go far back, sacred traditions that are outside of organized religion, right? And so interacting with those, and then again, starting to see where it meets that intuitive thing inside you, and trusting that. And then also, lastly, I'll say doing that in community, because yes, you want to trust your inner knowing. Yes, you want to trust the land, but there's something about doing it in community with other folks that allows it not to just kind of be a narcissistic, like, oh, I know this to be true because I just know it inside myself. Yes, you can trust yourself, but there's also like a connection, a way of confirming what your intuition is showing you, because you are connecting with other people who are on a similar journey, who are asking similar questions, who are in community with some of the same people, perhaps, or learning from some of the same teachers. That will provide a level of confirmation that maybe provides a little safety from just creating your own world of information that would not allow you to appropriate, right? Like, I think sometimes appropriation happens because people are just on their own, like, oh, I know I can wear a headdress because I saw some girl on Instagram do it, right? Like, okay, but is your community saying it's okay? I have a friend who has an indigenous tattoo, and he's not indigenous, but he is in deep relationship with indigenous people and sought permission. And it's very particular to where he lives and the land he's in community with and all of those things, right? So it was a very particular thing. It wasn't just a tribal tattoo at a random tattoo shop. So it was done in great community, and he remains in community with those same Indigenous people today. So, it's that kind of thing that didn't allow him to just go out and do something. It was, he has to now show up with that tattoo with people that know him and will continue to speak into his life. And I think that these different levels of kind of checking in really help us kind of be on a good path.
Thank you for that, Micky. That's one of the most multi-layered understandings that I've ever received for addressing this really important question. Yeah, thank you so much in general for giving us this rich understanding of what abundant healing can look like in an age of apparent scarcity. Yeah, it's just really touching. I'm wondering, would you be interested as we close out our time together to give us a small practice, something that we can ground all this richness that we've been marinating in our bodies and in our hearts?
Sure. I would love to share a practice that I learned from one of my teachers, Kai Chang Tam, who is a brilliant teacher on conflict and mediation, and it was really helpful for me initially learning this practice from her, and so it's something that I return to and I would love to share with folks. So I'm going to close my eyes because it helps me to close my eyes, and I invite you to close your eyes. And I am just checking in with my breathing. When I get to talking, my breathing can kind of speed up. So I invite you to check in with your breathing, see where it's at. And as you begin to check in with yourself, maybe breathing deeper, maybe relaxing your body a bit, allowing your shoulders to relax, checking into the places where you hold tension in your body. And if you can, begin to envision a single flame. A single flame, a candle flame, holding that image right in front of you, maybe even inside you. This is your living flame. The fire of your life that lives within inside you, that burns within inside you. It's yours. You can control it. So you might want the flame to burn a little brighter. It might feel a little warmer today, a little stronger, a little brighter. You might hear a crackle. Maybe it's a wood wick, and you hear it and you see it. Or maybe it is silent. Maybe it's a soft flame. Whatever it is yours. And now turn your awareness, your thoughts to the flame that another person, maybe there's someone else in the house or the building that you're in. Can you see that that person also has a flame inside them? They have a life force within them. Or maybe you think of someone you love and you know, or someone you'll see later today or this week, and you can imagine this flame inside them. It is not lit from your flame. It is theirs. It is not dimmed by your flame, and neither is yours dimmed by theirs. This flame that exists inside me and the flame that exists inside you is our sacred flame, our sacred human flame, our sacred source. And there is enough for you and for me and for our loved ones and for those we do not know, those we do not care for, those we have yet to know. Each one of us carrying a sacred flame. I see and honor your flame, even when I disagree with you, even when I am hurt by you. I have mine and respect and keep mine inside me. And I respect yours and make space to honor both of our sacred flames. I know that each of us is able to carry our light. Each of us is entrusted with our light and responsible for only our light. And it is our light together, individual and collective, that brings brightness to the whole world. I will remember my light when times feel difficult, when it feels uneasy, when it feels impossible to see. I will remember this light inside myself. And now, taking a deep breath, tucking my light away, keeping it in a secret, sacred place. Allowing you to tuck yours away in your secret, sacred place. As we come back to the shared space together, blinking open our eyes, witnessing each other.
Thank you, Micky. I don't mean to sound cheesy, but that was lit.
Wow.
know.
Everybody there.
But really, there's something about that evocation of the candle, the flame, and it's like still, but it's shimmering, and noticing that in me, honoring it in others, honoring it in those I love, honoring it in those I have difficulty with. Thank you. So if you're tuning into this and you're wanting to follow more of Micky's work, which I imagine you are, you should check out MickyScottBeyJones.com. But where else can we find you, Micky, and what's on the horizon? What are you up to these days?
Yeah. Well, my website is a great place to go. People can also follow me on social media. I have all the social medias. And on Instagram, it's a little complicated. I'm electric_lady_MSJ, Micky ScottBey Jones. But there you'll be able to go to my link tree and find my newsletter sign up, my tiny newsletter that will begin coming out in August. I have links to my videos. I have a YouTube channel. I'm the only Micky ScottBey Jones on the planet. So if you Google me, I will come up, and you'll find that YouTube channel, or if you search me on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. So I'm pretty easy to find. And what's up for me is really a lot of work around the Enneagram and resilience. Both separately and together, both the Enneagram alone and Enneagram and resilience alone. So I coach and teach on those topics, and I am doing a lot of kind of foundational work to be able to release some workshops and courses maybe later this year and then on in the next year. And right now I have a bunch of panels up on my YouTube page, which I love, Enneagram typing panels, which is super fun to hear people talk about their type if you're into Enneagram. But really having conversations like this with folks to talk about how we heal and build resilience and survive in a world that can feel very overwhelming. I have had to do a lot of work around that in order to survive and thrive, and I really want other people to feel like they have the tools that they need to survive and thrive. So that's my work, and I would love to connect with people further on that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. What a beautiful session with Micky ScottBey Jones. I hope that you go forth in renewed resilience and renewed confidence that the sources of healing are abundant, can be discovered within the world around us, within the relationships we're embedded in, within our ancestors, and within ourselves. Thank you.